He's Dave and I'm Dallas, and we have opinions on just about everything. Sometimes they're on point, and sometimes they go down better with a glass of wine. Join us. This is the Wine and Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of Wine and, the show where we pair wine with entertainment, delude ourselves into thinking you want to hear what we have to say about different pieces of pop culture and art, but know for a fact that you need to hear what we have to say about wine, because man, who knows anything about wine? We sure don't. Well, that's not true. We totally do and can help you find the best pairing for whatever it is you're planning to read, watch, or listen to. But before we drop our man pearls of wisdom on you, make sure to smash that subscribe or follow button. Dallas never reads these things before I start talking, blathering on about it.
That's a fact.
Yeah, man pearls of wisdom. Phrase of the day. Thank you. Anyways, make sure to smash that subscribe or follow button. It's how any podcast grows and reaches new listeners. Also, leave a rating and or review. Those help our egos grow and reach new victims. So leave a nice review. Thank you very much. Or send us an email, wine, the letter N, POD, wineandpod@gmail.com. If you have something mean to say, or you're like, you guys could be a lot better and here's some advice, send that email. Let us get better. Then leave that nasty review if we don't. Now, I also wanted to mention that I just said this is another episode of Wine and, but this is your forewarning that this podcast is about to undergo a name change and a rebranding very soon. So expect that hopefully within the next couple of episodes before we get too deep into season 2. Wine and is still going to be the parent umbrella that this podcast is a part of, but we noticed a couple of things. One, Wine and really doesn't say enough about the podcast and what we do here, pairing wine with entertainment. And also, it's very search engine unfriendly. This is something we had to learn the hard way. But the ellipses, wine and ... every search engine under the sun, whether you're searching for it on Spotify, you're searching for it on Google, Apple iTunes, it hates the ellipses, or it just doesn't know what to do with it. It just sort of discards it as far as I can tell. And then it's just searching for wine and, which is such a generic phrase without enough distinction to it. So we are retitling this podcast. It will have a new name within the next couple of episodes. Look for that very soon. We have a new logo and whatnot underway. I don't want to announce it quite yet because things may change before we actually roll it out, but that is coming very soon. And hey, don't just follow the podcast, follow us on Substack as well. You know, if you're already on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, you're already using vastly more evil corporate platforms to spread more misinformation than independent writers on Substack. For all its founders' massive flaws, and Substack founders have massive flaws, moving over to Substack is a step in the right direction at the very least. I follow a ton of independent writers that are, speaking truth to power, getting the word out there, that are really keeping me sane during these years that we're about to encounter. So find us on Substack. It's a great place. We have independent wine writing, independent political writing, independent entertainment writing. It is a great place to find these writers and voices and interact with them. So find us, wineand.substack.com. That is not changing. It will still be wineand as our home base of operations. And there, you can get to know us better, hang out, wineand.substack.com. You'll find weekly articles on additional wine and entertainment pairings, collabs with other independent writers of both wine and entertainment. And that's the place where you can also support us by becoming a paid subscriber of the Substack. Unlock paid-only benefits like uncut interviews and pairing directories that track all the wine and whatever pairings we've done throughout the years. You can also rifle through the podcast episodes there, clicking on only one category or another. So, for instance, you can just listen to the wine and movie episodes or the wine and comic episodes like we're about to hit today. You can do so there, wineand.substack.com. We hope to see you there, folks. Okay, so today we're here to talk about the Image comic book series Immortal Sergeant by the writer who defined the character Deadpool for both the comics and screen. He had the character-defining run, Joe Kelly, and artist Ken Nimura. Now, Joe Kelly, as just mentioned, he is best known for his character-defining run on Deadpool. It is one of my personal favorite comics of all time. Like, if you don't have the trade paperbacks of Joe Kelly's Deadpool, they've collected it in an omnibus once or twice, but it keeps going out of print, so I think it's very expensive to try and get the single volume omnibus of his whole run. It was like 30 plus issues. So it's a big fat ass book if you try and get the whole thing in one go, but get the smaller trades. Those still exist. Get the Joe Kelly run on Deadpool. It is so good. He's the one that made Deadpool a fourth wall breaking character. It really added the humor. Even Kelly is a little critical of the movies and that they took some of the humanity and the darker elements of Wade Wilson's character away. Like he's on record as saying that in the comic he tried to give this character more troubling aspects to his character that were meant to be thought-provoking in that way. Like, let's talk about that. Like, what this character does is not normal, is not sane, is not healthy. And the movies mostly just went for the comedy that he had injected into the character and the satire without really delving too deep into the serious subject matter, which, hey, it's a movie. What are you going to do? But his run is much better than the movies. Like, I think a lot of the criticisms of the movies get that are fair criticisms, even though I do quite dig the movies. The comics, his run of them really get in there. So I've been a fan of his ever since. Now, after his Deadpool run, he and artist Ken Nimura did another Image comic series called I Kill Giants, which was adapted into a feature film starring Madison Wolfe, Imogen Poots, and Zoe Saldana, and directed by Anders Walter, Academy Award winner for Best Live Action Short Film of 2013, Helium. And then he went on to do this 2017 movie, I Kill Giants. Now, I feel I have never read I Kill Giants, nor have I seen the movie. And I think that's why when Immortal Sergeant was coming out about 2 years ago in single issue format, I felt guilty. I love Joe Kelly, and I kind of didn't follow him into his creator-owned work. I had kind of like poked at, seen it, been like, yeah. That's on my never-ending watch list on Netflix now. Yeah. That comic series is one I will get to someday, and I never did. Yeah. So when Immortal Sergeant came out, and I'm always like, Joe Kelly this, Joe Kelly that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to support this one. I knew nothing about it. I went in completely blind. I knew it was the same creative team of I Kill Giants, but I also noticed that Ken Nimura really tweaked his style for this. Like, it looks nothing like what he did in I Kill Giants. And that was intriguing, but I still didn't know what it was about. And it looks very manga-esque. It's black and white. And it was 9 issues long. And the thing I love about a 9-issue long series is that's exactly how long it needs to be, because that is a weird number. That is not something where they're like, we're giving you 4 issues, we're giving you 6 issues. Those are normal. 12 is even normal. 9 is just this odd as nuts number where it's like, who does 9 issues? You do 9 issues because that's exactly what it takes. Like, you've written it out, you've done the script, you've broken it down. The artist has helped you break it down into what they think they're going to draw best. And then you take it to Image Comics and you're like, this is what we're doing. Right. And these comics came out so on time and on schedule. Like, plainly, it was done before they had started to release it. So when this was out I pre-ordered all the issues. I supported the comic like right away. And then I sat on it for a year, not reading it. I had the whole series. And once again, did not read it until recently. And when I finally read it, it was surprising in a number of ways that we're going to talk about here, because this was not what I expected from these guys, kind of at all. And I was impressed in certain ways. And I like the series a lot. It grew on me. It took a moment, I will say that. But yeah, my history with this series is just loving the creators, or at least Joe Kelly, not having done I Kill Giants, then being like, fine, fuck it, I'm going to do this one. And then finally reading it, and I had a lot to say after reading it. So we're going to talk about that.
No, you had a lot to say. No,
I do. But Dallas, what had you ever heard? Are you familiar with either of these creators? Were you familiar with I Kill Giants?
I was actually. I think you and I discussed this a while ago in one of our like evening wine benders, just passively, because you mentioned Immortal Sergeant, and I had never heard of that one. And I was familiar with I Kill Giants because of the fantastical kind of, that's when I say that's my thing. But generally, if there's sort of a fantastical world, I'm probably going to be drawn to that first. And so I Kill Giants was definitely on my radar, and I think I did I get that with you? I got a copy. You and I were together, and I don't remember if I got a copy of. I don't remember. There was something. We got a title, a title related to Eichel Giants. It may have been that free comic book day.
Oh,
you and I
yeah.
went to a couple of the stores to get some things a few
Yes.
years back. Anyway, so I wasn't very familiar at all with Immortal Sergeant. I mean, I love these two guys, of course, the Deadpool series. I'm not a huge Deadpool guy, but I appreciate everything that he did, and it's beautiful.
I'm only that Joe Kelly run. Like after that, I kind of pieced out, and I've poked back in now and again, and I'm like, it's basic. It's like they're riffing off what Joe Kelly laid down, but I feel like no one has come up with a take on the character that's particularly different or interesting, and I think he did it best. Yeah,
it's true. It's true. I think what he did, again, like I said, I'm not you. And there's another thing you and I discussed when we first started down this was that idea of going to comic book stores and seeing 9,000 different issues of
Deadpool
timelines of Deadpool and a lot of the other Batman.
He was the new Wolverine, right?
Exactly.
Where it's like he was guest starring and everything. It was him and someone else in team up books, and which is why it's so funny that Deadpool and Wolverine became a movie, because they are the two Marvel characters where it's like you proliferate everywhere because you just sell, and like we're making way more than anyone gives a shit about, but you still sell. And it's a little much, but anyway.
And it's a little much. You know my taste a bit, and I sort of checked out. But Kelly stuff's great. The art in Eichel Giants is so vastly different from the art in Immortal Sergeant.
Yes,
it's almost like it's two different vocabularies. I guess technically they are two different vocabularies, because Immortal Sergeant is more sort of manga-ish.
But even just the fact that this artist was able to, and this is something he developed just for this series, he was just like, this is what I think the series needs to be. And Joe Kelly was like, okay. And because he's like, I trust you at this point. So like, whatever you think is going to need, we're going to run with that. And when you go back, you can see that it could be like, when you really squint, you're like, this could be the same artist. You would never think
the benchmarks.
Right. If someone didn't tell you it was the same artist, you would never think it in a million years. And even once they tell you, your first reaction is bullshit.
Yeah. You got to go looking for it. Yeah.
So this was your first time reading it, I'm assuming.
It was. You definitely have a bit of a not a buddy cop, but a buddy cop kind of.
It's a father-son road trip,
here.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, so I think that's a good thing. So let's the story, the comic, is basically, it's called Immortal Sergeant. It follows a kind of hero cop entering the retirement phase. Sergeant Jim Sargent, spelled slight. His last name is spelled slightly like more Sargent kind of a thing, but it's pronounced Sergeant Jim Sargent, and that's kind of a running joke of the whole thing as they go. And he's approaching his retirement years, and yet he has one cold case that he's never closed, that he is hell-bent on closing before he finally closes this chapter of his life. And his son, his adult son, now married with children, and the son's birthday is coming up, winds up getting strung along on this road trip to close this cold case with his dad. And they are estranged from each other. They do not get along. They are not the same kind of people. So this comic, the first thing I will say is, when I read the first issue, maybe like I had false starts on reading the whole series. I kept sitting down with the first issue, reading it, and it didn't grip me that much. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. Not much happens in the first issue. And so you're like, okay, interesting. It kind of takes, this is a 9-issue limited series. The story doesn't really kick off until the third issue. It's like the first 3 issues are all just introducing each character. Here's who they are. Here's what's going on. And then the road trip begins. When the road trip begins, I was captivated. I loved this series after that. But it took me a moment to kind of get involved. So I would like read the first issue, get distracted, not continue. and then like a month later be like, oh yeah, I want to read this series, read the first issue, get distracted, so on and so forth. And finally I was like, no, I really want to read this. Where the fuck does it go after the first issue? And I was actually surprised because it changed so much after the first issue, after that first chapter, because then you get, the sun doesn't even appear until issue 2, and they don't even really meet up and start doing their thing together until issue 3, and that's where it really kind of kicks off. And this is a story, according to Joe Kelly, like this was a very personal story that took him many years to write, because this is, his dad was a cop, and this was him working out his estranged relationship with his, I believe, I don't know how long deceased, but his dad wasn't around anymore. But he had an estranged relationship with his very hero cop dad, or very, very cop minded dad, that when growing up, he did not really connect with him, didn't really understand his dad or his job. And then of course his son grew up to be a writer and a creator, which I don't think his dad understood even a little bit. So this was him working out that relationship in fiction form, kind of in real time. So we're going to talk about that in a moment. But on that note, let's actually quickly give those hints of what we're drinking with this comic. And I wanted to mention that bit because my wine is a very traditional old world style, done in a very new place, with a grape you would not expect, in a place you would not expect, from a very new producer. So it's kind of like the young. I wanted to find a wine where it was like the young picking up the old traditions and carrying it into something new, that would be, because the way this comic works, it's like it is a journey of them coming to understand each other. So it's not just the division between the old generation and the new. It's about them finding that common ground to some degree. So I wanted that. And I think in broad strokes, we like to always say, like, we're going to recommend a specific wine. But I think, guys, for this comic, go into your wine shop. Here's a fun question to the lob at your wine shop person. Just be like, do you have a wine that is from a winery or a vineyard, something that's been established for a long time, that has been picked up by the new generation and taken somewhere new? Like, they have changed things, and now it's a different type of thing, but still from the same vineyard, still from the same, they're not just like, they didn't just overhaul the whole thing, but they overhauled it up to a point. And it's like the new generation has come in and they've made something different out of it, because there are a lot of wineries these days or vineyards where that is 100% true. The new generation is now organic, biodynamic. Maybe they're trying natural wine methods. Maybe they're trying minimal intervention. Maybe that skirts the line of straight up natural. Maybe they are, at the very least, they've changed the style of the wine, that like at one point it was big, bold, and robust, and now they're making fresher, younger, lighter versions, lower in alcohol, things like that. Like, what has that young generation come in and done in that old place? That's the kind of wine, in broad strokes, I think you should pair with this comic, because that's going to be thematically on point. Dallas, what give us some hints on yours?
I like that. I went a bit more direct, and this is when I say it's non-traditional, it's not. There's probably 2 people in the world who consider it wine.
Okay, got it.
And it is a stretch to
yourself
consider
included.
It wine. Yeah, exactly. For the purposes of this podcast. But
it's us. We're the 2 people.
It's us. We're the 2 people. Because of the sort of the father-son dynamic, I wanted to. I want to, again, we go back to how, that sort of premise of how I make my pairings. And it's either the thing I want to drink as a character in the world, where I'm very passive, just leaning against the wall, watching the action. I'm never lifting a finger to help anyone. Or the thing I enjoy as I'm lying on the couch to read the IP. And for me, I went with the thing I could imagine the father drinking. I imagine this is his drink. I imagine
I did have that thought too. Yeah.
Okay. I imagine this is his evening wine, so to speak. So It is very tasty. I'm not a guy who's into this particular presentation of alcohol, this genre or class of alcohol. Not my thing generally, but this, if I had to pick one, is my thing as well. So I imagine myself being the dad who's trying to, exist with his son, and this is the thing he is drinking, and that gives you absolutely no information. But if you pay attention, you might.
But it's going to be interesting when we get to the reveal. So hold on tight. We're going to talk about the comic, then we're going to circle back to these wines. So on that note, I've already given you kind of my first impressions on the comic in terms of like, it took me a couple issues to really get into it, but then I wound up loving it. But what was your first impression going into this? I know you pretty much went in blind in terms of reading this. I just sent you. I was like, I want to talk about this one. And you're like, okay. And then so
what's amazing is when you sent it, because you sent it last week, I was fully expecting, like the 30 pages, like 2 issues of something.
Oh,
and
then 300 or 200 something pages. But it's very manga-esque, so it's breezy and read it's not dense. But it's a lot of page count. It's a lot of page count.
When I opened it, I was like, this son of a bitch. God damn it.
You just had to trust me. I'm like, it's a quick read. Trust
That's
me.
Right.
It does not take long. But
That's
the page count is a bit intimidating because I think the comics are all like double size. Every single 9. I think maybe every single of the 9 issues is like 40 pages or something. Or
that's
yeah. So it's like it actually adds up. Like when you look at the page count, you're like. Like little bit of a heart attack, and then you're like, I want you to have read this and be ready by next week. And Dallas was like, fuck you.
I know.
But when you started reading it, I'm assuming, did you Google it? Did you look it up before reading it?
No, I don't like any leads for
either.
anything I go into blind. Because I don't trust anyone else's opinion of anything more than I trust my own, particularly when it comes to art. And I'll consider it after the fact, but the primary sort of experience is my own.
I don't even know about that, but sure.
But I will say it's so curious because, first of all, the cover art on all of these just knocks my socks off. All the actual covers just knock my socks off. That style is just so irreverent, but it's got
dynamic.
some weight to it. It's dynamic, but it's also sparse. Like it's not overly saturated in terms of the imagery on the actual print. But agreed, the first 3 or so issues, not a slog by any stretch of the imagination, but definitely...
you're a little bit like, what is this comic about? Like, what is it doing? Where are we going with this? Because you're just going. And you're like, okay, yes, this sort of has-been hero cop. And very, like, the Immortal Sergeant is very Clint Eastwood, Dirty Harry-ish type of a thing. Or, like, that kind of cop that Gene Hackman would play back in the day, where he's, like, he's tough. Not in a 80s action hero way, right? Not ripped.
Yeah.
He's got a slight build. He doesn't look tough at all, but then he is tough as nails. He can eat anything. He can drink anything. He can, he's very, one of the things that I appreciated about the comic and in the take on, especially once I realized that this was Joe Kelly working his own feelings about his dad out, is that it is a look at the myth of the hero cop. Yes.
Sure.
But at the same time, it does acknowledge certain things about the hero cop. Like there are these moments where the Jim Sargent is kind of, his son is like, Dad, what the fuck are you doing? Stop being offensive. Stop saying these things. And then he'll whip something out where it's like, he just observed something by entering this room and being super cavalier. And what he observed, you're sort of like, oh shit, that was actually very observant and very perceptive, and he's being a bit of a dick about it, but then when push comes to shove, he actually can be a little bit sensitive about it too and not be a total dick to the person he's talking to. So he gives the hero cop like there are pluses to this mentality. There are pluses to what this person's been trained to do. That's not to say they get off scot-free and that ultimately at the end of the day, this comic does not really come down on the side of like, this is a good thing. But they acknowledge certain things that are either you could call it impressive or just, I think things that even Joe Kelly was like, yeah, I could never be that person. I never had this skill. And it's interesting that probably his dad did whip this skill out now and again. So.
It makes sense because I myself occasionally do get a bit sort of self-reflective in some of my writing.
Yeah.
And after the fact, because if it's something I've planned out, fully, and there's about 20% of the stuff I don't plan out and just allow myself to kind of feel my way through, that stuff ends up being really about my position in relation to some archetype in my life and a comparison. So that definitely comes through in this, and good on him, on Joe, for owning up to that and just following it through and creating a great work as a result of it. This is a testament to any of those writers who are told, to not write about themselves. Fuck that. Write about yourself.
Right.
Right.
And he has, because the son is like, he creates video games, but it is and I'm pretty sure Joe Kelly has written for video games, almost no question under the sun. Now, this is a son who designs video games and like the little app phone games. So like the dad just does not get it. Although near the end of the series, there's a moment where he's in a hospital and like the nurses are all like, oh yeah, we play that game. It's a great game. It really gets us through the day. And like the dad, to some degree, he's still confused. But on the other side, the dad slowly but surely is like, this gets people through their day.
Yeah.
Like if it's a hard day, if they're just like, they're doing work we need them to do that is hard work. And like, when they get a break, they want to play this game. Right. And like he starts to grudgingly accept that this has a place in society. Like this is a positive that his son is doing, even though he still doesn't entirely get it. And the son equally is like, compared to his dad, like his dad can do things and be ready for things and encounter things that the son is just like, no. Yeah, right. It's like the son's like, no conflict, like conflict avoidant 100%. And the dad, of course, is, again, they're extremes. So it's like there's a better happy medium where you're not conflict avoidant, but you're also not conflict creating. You're not just like bull in a china shop going in and making conflict happen wherever you go. And so it really explores these extremes, but I think, one of the things that's great about this series, it is long enough and goes on long enough, and you're really exploring this relationship between the two main characters. But you do wonder, there is this cold case the dad is trying to close. And you really wonder how this is going to end. Because that is something where it's like the message of this comic is going to live or die on that resolution. It's setting a lot up on that. And I was very happy. I didn't doubt it because Joe Kelly, I knew he was a thoughtful writer.
You're in good hands.
Yeah. Another thing Joe Kelly has done in the past is he did this one single Superman story. It's one issue. It's Action Comics 775. It's called What's So Good About oh no. Am I going to remember this title? What's the phrase? Truth and something in the American way?
Truth, justice, in the American way.
Truth, justice, and it's like, what's so good about truth, justice, in the American way? That's the title of the story, and it's one single issue and it explores kind of the extreme vigilante violence versus the Superman style of superheroics and pits them up against each other. And because Superman is supposed to represent that like truth, justice in the American way, like faith in the systems, right? Ideals, faith in the systems, faith in humanity, not going in and tearing everything down to rebuild it from scratch, kind of a thing, which is sort of that modern way of wanting to do everything. And to this day, that one single story, people are like, that's one of the best Superman stories ever written, ever told. And I agree with it. It is one of the best comics ever done and one of the best takes on Superman, that everything that we say is outdated about the character is pitted up against all these new ideas of how we're supposed to fix things. And it does a great job, similar to how this comic looks at the two generations and heroic cop versus the very conflict avoidant, empathetic younger generation.
Yeah.
And it's like it's not like we need hero cops. No, it doesn't say that. It basically at the end of the day is like, that was never a good idea.
Right.
That was never a good idea.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
It's like we don't need Dirty Harry. Like, Dirty Harry will always be a bad idea, but cops are like, they are there and they have a certain way of looking at things that is still important because they're dealing with the side of life that a lot of us literally try to close our eyes to and not deal with. And we do need people to deal with it, and that is its own thing up to a point. So it finds to a point, it finds a happy medium and gives credit where it's due. But on the other hand, is like, but the hero cop myth, that is something that has been, and even Jim Sargent at the end of the day, when he realizes where his cold case goes and what he's been living his life in a fantasy about, was like something
fantasy.
And he's like, this was wasted fucking time. At the end, like, not that something wrong didn't happen, not that there wasn't a right to be made, but what he thought it was and what he thought he'd do about it was all a fantasy in his head.
He had collected, and to a certain degree, you look at his job, right? He is a cop, a detective. It is about pulling the disparate elements together in order to create a story, in order to reveal a tale, the truth, hopefully. And and unfortunately, with this case, that's kind of been exaggerated and exalted and turned to 10 over years and years and years, so that he's created this mythos in his mind to a certain degree that he's essentially chasing, that he finds out is essentially very far away from the truth, right? And I think that commentary alone, I'd be interested to talk to Joe Kelly about what inspired this specifically from his dad's life, because I'm sure there has to be some unrequited
some anecdote,
something in his dad's life that really just sort of planted a seed in him.
Either that, or it could be a true crime story type of a thing, like something where it's like, here's where we, like, this unsolved murder that turned out to be blank, right? And it's like, and maybe that was just like that kernel of like, yes, an unsolved quote unquote murder, and yes, but at the same time, it wasn't the
yes and no.
It wasn't the cruel, inhumane, this villainous, demonic, murderous son of a bitch kind of a thing that, was in his head. It's like, it was just a tragedy that he was spending his whole life trying to correct in a hero versus villain way, when that wasn't what the situation actually was. And all he did was commit himself to correcting a tragic wrong that was colored in a different way, because he made it a mythological thing. He made it a good versus evil thing. And that's where things go a little bit wrong. It's so interesting you mentioned that, and you also mentioned his treatment, Joe Kelly's treatment of the Superman arc, because to a certain degree, Sargent has created this avatar of himself within himself as a hero, who is hell-bent on, chasing down this demon, this sort of icon of evil in his mind. And it's interesting how that sort of concept is bastardized over the years in his psyche. Interesting commentary. I'm not going anywhere, but just I like the character. I like the character a lot. Yes.
I did not expect to like this character as much as I did.
Yes.
But upon reflection, this is exactly the kind of character I would like, because it's kind of me.
So sure of themselves, and then
so sure of themselves, but also occasionally wrong, and
but also like very hard to let, like, it takes him the whole series to accept the being wrong about anything, right? It's like, all
right, that seemed a little personal, Dave. That seemed a little targeted and personal.
but in the
All right,
sense
calm down.
of, but not in a little way, right? I think the thing that finally makes him do it is because the thing he was wrong about was such a giant thing.
Right. It
And
was
so
glaring.
that,
Yeah.
yes. And so it was like, it's not a little thing, which is like, it's easy for us to not accept any slight, like you could be slightly wrong about this, but such a tiny issue that we're like, no, we're right, whatever. And it's like, it's not a big deal one way or the other. So we don't care enough to go through this journey of accepting what little bits of it we might be wrong about. But then when the big thing you're wrong about, that thing you've held on your whole life, and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
And then he realizes what he's done to his family because of it too. And there's even this beautiful thematic mirroring between his family and the tragedy that befell the other family that he's been trying to correct all these years. And there's this one beautiful line at the very end where he comes back from resolving this whole thing. His son was in the hospital, kind of sitting this part of it out. And the son was like, so what happened? And the dad, kind of referencing both his life and the life he just and the other family's life that he just came from, and he just says, I threw away a child.
Here's, by the way, that line, that scene, that line is so cinematic, and it is such expert narrative and writing that I was sitting there imagining the film and imagining that moment. And I'm not a crier, but I was like, oh, if I had human emotions, I'd probably cry here. Yep. Right? Because it was so weighty. It was pulling double duty. It was putting us in touch with the macro and the micro, with his sort of life's mission, and also in touch with his relationship to this little boy that, who he's affected, every day of his life. And so it was so masterful, so beautifully done. And bravo, Joe, on the writing there. I'm telling you, man, we need some more screenplays out of you.
Yes. I mean, to be fair, I Kill Giants was made into a movie. This is another point I wanted to make. This would make such an incredible movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is so easily cinematic while being dramatic, like a family drama, kind of a double family drama.
It is.
And an exploration of the myth of the hero cop, that old... Dirty Harry style thing, and like taking it into the modern world and really peeling it apart and seeing both the good and bad that is a part of that, and dissecting it and the good and bad of the modern world and our kind of conflict avoidance and just wanting to love and be empathetic about everything, and kind of really taking both sides to task on their extremeness when they get extreme.
Yeah.
And this would be such Sundance fodder. It would be a moderate budget. Yes, it would be such a controlled budget. It's just a slice of life with a little bit of like car chasey action, but not much.
Just enough.
It's very light. Just enough. You could make this. I mean, if you had no big stars or they were working for back end and you didn't have to pay them, like, this could be done for $1 million easily. You'd want more.
Oh, for sure, you'd want more. But you could do a very slick and lovely film for $1 million of this. Now, here's the question.
This is easy Blumhouse levels of budget.
So easy. Who are you casting in the roles, though? This is the first time we've done fan cast on this podcast.
No,
these are our people, though. Half the people listening are like, fan cast.
No shit.
Yeah,
that is a question.
I'm gonna say for the dad, for Jim Sargent, he was the bald guy. Crap! What I got to
Well, for me personally, so the first name that comes to mind for the immortal Jim Sargent is Michael Fassbender.
Oh,
I think he would be an incredible Jim Sargent.
Interesting,
especially after seeing him in The Killer, the David Fincher Netflix movie recently. Like just sort of that, like he's good at being very confident, but also unassuming in its way. Yeah. And, he's got the right build where it's slight but powerful. And like when he's got to whip it out, he will do it in a heartbeat. But at the same time, he's very good at just having this confident air about him. And in his older age, he's starting to get that grizzled look to him, which is the perfect grizzled look. Give him a mustache. like Jim Sargent, and I'm telling you, I think Michael Fassbender would be my ideal.
Okay.
I feel like you might need to go smaller than that if you're going to keep the budget under control. But
yeah.
But if you're going to do a Netflix movie and they're going to be like, well, we love Michael Fassbender, The Killer was a hit, kind of a thing. It's like, great, cast him in this, and let's do that for him.
What's the guy's what's his name? Christopher Maloney.
Which one's Christopher Maloney?
His
name is very familiar.
He stars with Mariska Hargitay in NYPD.
Okay.
Yeah, NYPD. He's a great actor. He starred in that. Actually, he starred in another comic book series on Sci-Fi. It was Sci-Fi Network's first comic book series called Happy.
With an I. I was spelling it with an E at the end. There we go.
Yeah. He was in Happy, which was the Sci-Fi Network's. A great first season of that show.
Yes. Okay. This guy. Yeah.
That'd be my initial cast for that. Anyway,
okay, cool.
We don't mind a little fan casting occasionally around here.
No,
guys.
not at all. What about The Sun? What do you think about The Sun?
Oh God.
I mean, that's a little bit harder, just because.
Yeah, we'll go with an unknown. Keep the budget down.
Yeah. Well, that too, but a little up and coming, right? Someone who's had a tiny splash somewhere or another.
Yeah.
But I'd have to give that some thought.
I know.
Okay, but the Immortal Sergeant, Christopher Maloney or Michael Fassbender. Depending on the size and their willingness to do it. Like, maybe you're like, hey, it's the creator of Deadpool and it's his latest movie and it's indie, and I don't know, maybe like their agent you'd have to be friends with Fassbender himself and be able to get to him, because the agent of course is like, that's not a payday for me, I'm not getting your script to him. Right,
we're filming it in 3 weeks, you're in and out in 3 weeks. It's 2 locations.
But again, but for all you people who don't work in the film world, if you want a big name actor, their agent will not help you get a role that pays little to nothing.
That's right.
Right? For a back end, because the agent then doesn't get paid. They get 10% of whatever their client does. So they will not, even if they tell you, they're like, oh yeah, we'll read it. Like, no, they're not.
We'll pass it right on. They're not.
We'll pass it right on. Then they're going to pass on it. And you're not going to know if Fassbender ever read it or not. No, you will have to find a friend of a friend. Like, you will need to somehow be chummy and get the actor to get excited about the project and tell their agent they're doing the project. And the actor has to be in a position where they're doing well enough that they can tell their agent that they're just doing the project for a month, and the agent's just got to block that out of the schedule. But that's how you're going to get to do that. Agents and managers, they only make tiny percentages of the big lump sum payday. Managers are usually a little more open to the idea because they're trying to cultivate their client's career as a whole. But if the client already has a great career, they're also not really going to care. And they're going to be like, no, we need the big fat payday. So that's not going to work. You're going to need to get it to the actor directly.
That's why it's called a craft, guys. Because sometimes you gotta figure out how to connect the angles and the people and be in the right place. And your personality and your ability to be personable goes a long way. And I'm not a very personable person. I try, but it's just not my nature. So I surround myself with very personable people like Dave.
That's true. He's like, you're going to sell my screenplay one of these days. I'm like,
you're doing this.
Right.
I don't want to talk to anyone.
Yep. Even though he's very good at it when he has to do it. Sometimes he's better than me. I watch him do it, and then he comes out, and he's like, I hate doing it. And I'm like, Dallas, I did not speak one word that whole time. You just kept going. I'm like, you ran that room. What are you even talking about?
God. And then I have to go sleep for 3 days and cry.
3 days, right. He has to go
in a calf
cave for 3 days. Yes, this is true.
Anyway,
all right.
Yeah, so just final thoughts on this one for me, Dave. I would just say, thoroughly, I guess I'm not impressed because I knew it was going to be something interesting just based on Joe's reputation and Nimura's reputation, of course, and being familiar with I Kill Giants. By the way, guys, if you haven't checked out I Kill Giants, please do. And
I still haven't. So I have to.
I highly recommend even reading these two, not side by side, but in proximity to one another time-wise, and just look at how vastly different they are in style, in storytelling. And it's a testament to allowing creators to just create what is important to them, what is burning inside of them, to answer the questions that they've been asking themselves their entire life. And often you get some really, really, really good art out of it. And this is just that. It's fantastic.
Yeah. It's funny. I just double checked. I do own I Kill Giants on digital.
Okay.
I still haven't watched it.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I bought it. So I did support you that way, Joe. Let's put it that way.
That's right.
There you go. All right, guys. Let's talk about the wines that we've actually paired it with, the specific wines that we actually paired it with. D-Man, how about you go first?
All right. Let's see. So I decided to go with something. First of all, I think this script, I call everything a script, but it is a script technically. This graphic novel, this series of comic books is surprisingly deep. And the depth hinges on, as we were talking about earlier, Dave, kind of hinges on that moment of realization for him, which is essentially where this whole thing has been leading, where the character's life has been leading. And that moment of that realization of the misspent time, of the sort of the countless hours spent in service of this, giant demon that he's essentially been chasing, to the detriment of everyone around him. That's a heavy and deep moment. And this is a company guy for all intents and purposes. He's a company guy. He serves the company. He serves the clock in, the clock out, the mission. He's a jobber. And I imagine in that moment, when he has that realization, if he could reach for anything, he would reach for something that was really deep, complex, smooth, but also dark. Because this is a man who I think has a lot of darkness within him, and this moment is also very dark personally for him. That the idea of anything, any levity or any lightness or anything remotely kind of whimsical, I associate light with whimsy, of course, is just out of the question. So I went with a beer. I did it.
Ooh.
I absolutely did it 100%.
And which two people would think it's a wine?
Me and my friend who owns a brewery in Dublin, and he calls it wine. He calls beer wine. So he actually calls beer wine, which is I'm sure there's a case to be made that they cross somewhere. The etymology of those things cross someplace.
They are fermented and have alcohol. I think that's about it.
Who knows, right? But the brewery itself started way back in 1758. I believe it is technically the oldest brewery still creating in the modern world, I believe.
Okay.
And how I found this beer, I'm a guy who, if I want to develop a vocabulary for something, or a passive sort of like, or somehow negate my disgust for something, I kind of lean into it. And I start trying everything until I find something I like. Similar to our discussion about how we kind of got into wine, right? Yep. And I've never been a beer guy, but, wine isn't appropriate for every occasion for me.
It's not. It's true.
And I like to, add a few different languages there. And IPAs, disgusting. All the other, all the other classes of wine are just absolutely disgusting to me. But the one class of wine, genre of beer. I was gonna say,
are we really going to do this going forward? I'm like, this is going to be so confusing on an audio podcast. Let me tell you.
I love it. all the other ones, I've done beers in different countries and sort of different places, and everywhere I go, I try a different beer. And it's always just okay. This tastes like bad, and the one class is stout, and the old world does stout very well. It's kind of a cornerstone of their vocabulary of beer, and there's chocolate stout, coffee stout, all the different stouts. And for me, the best stout is this oatmeal stout from Samuel Smith's Old Brewery, Tadcaster, 1758. It is just the perfect beer to me. And I imagine this guy who, he's a gumshoe, essentially. He's part of that. He's a part of that
maverick
tradition.
Gumshoe, yeah.
But he's a part of that tradition and that sort of fraternal kind of thing. And I imagine an oatmeal stout from Sam Smith is what he's drinking.
Beautiful.
So that is my pairing, people.
I'm going to need to try an oatmeal stout one of these days. I don't think I ever have. If I have, it's been a long time. But I was just talking on Facebook with someone about oat ice cream, Oatly ice cream, and I love oat milk. I love oat milk. I love all the oat, non-dairy, whatever. Because I love
Debbie
the
oatmeal pies as a child were a favorite.
Yes.
I used to scrape the filling out. I hate the filling.
Oh, because you hate the icing. Literally one of the non-dairy ice creams I just had was oatmeal dream pie ice cream, which is that Ben & Jerry's as a non-dairy and made out of oat milk. And it is the Little Debbie cream pies, all blended in this oat milk base, and just like it's so good, so good. So yeah, oatmeal flavor. I can imagine myself maybe being able to get into a stout with that oatmeal flavor and aftertaste. So, as mentioned before, for me, I did a very old-fashioned style of wine, done somewhere you probably wouldn't expect. So this is. There's something about this comic that was just...
So it's an old world grape, did you say? Refresh my memory? What's...
No.
Oh?
Not. I don't think so.
Okay.
It's not what we can... this is a... I mean, this grape has been around, don't get me wrong, but it's not one of the noble grapes.
Got
it.
But
the style is pretty close. So there is something about this comic that is, and I think the art especially, we didn't talk too much about the art, but like that open, sparse style and how light on its feet it makes everything feel, even though the themes are so weighty, some of the things that go on are so weighty, and yet it's a breeze to read. You just go through it. So I wanted a sparkling wine. I really wanted something that had that effervescence, that was just, you don't need to sip it too often, but when you do, you get so much in the mouth. And I did something in a proper traditional champenois style, so proper champagne method.
Okay.
But it is a sparkling Alvarinho from Portugal, from the Vinho Verde. And this it's a 2020 Quintas del Melgaço, with the C with a little squiggly underneath it, right? So Melgaço, Super Reserva, a sparkling Alvarinho. It's done in the proper champenois style, which is the champagne method, which is a second fermentation happening in the bottle. So it is aged in the bottle for at least 24 months, so 2 years before being released. I did a post on Substack and the social media. I think you noticed it, Dallas, where I had the sparkling wine and I said it looked like a galaxy in a glass.
Yeah.
Because of that was this sparkling Alvarinho.
Okay.
It has that nice dark. When you do a champagne method, it sits on the lees being the dead yeast cells. Because you do a second fermentation in the bottle, everything stays in the bottle. Right. For a long period of time. And at one point you eject and you filter it out, and then the bottle you buy does not have this dead yeast cells in it, but it stays in the bottle all this time that it's fermenting, and then this 24 months in bottle aged usually is on the lees. And so you get all these bready, biscuity aromas, the color of the wine is nice and dark, almost like it borderline butterscotchy caramel in color, and it just gets these slight nutty notes and this unctuousness. And the bubbles, I'm going to give this wine this credit. It was the perfect bubbles. It wasn't too light and not too heavy. I'm not a big sparkling wine fan. It usually gives me indigestion. I do want to like it. It just doesn't work with me very often. So I drink it very rarely. Yeah. And this one, never. The bubbles were flawless. And I don't like the weight of them, the mousse, as they call it. So
you get the tickle, as they say. You get the shimmer, the tickle. Interesting.
And it's more than a frizzante. I'm not a big fan of frizzante. I kind of hate frizzante, to be honest. And hate's a strong word, but frizzante is one of those things where I'm like, you're so close to a still wine. Just be a still wine. I know. You know, I'm like, why this hint of trickle, like, I don't know. It feels like it's a tease that goes nowhere.
Yeah, it feels, honest to me, not flat champagne, but it feels like champagne that's okay.
Yeah. You're like, why are you there? You're not doing anything. Yeah. So frizzante is not my favorite. I'm a little, I don't drink a lot of it. So to be fair, you know, I could be better exposed, but I like the bubbles to be more. But when the bubbles get really heavy and really pronounced, there is something about it. And it's funny because soda doesn't do this to me, but sparkling wine does. There's something about the way the bubbles are where I burp for like hours after, and I'm like, oh, and I get the sour stomach and it's bad. Yeah. But this one, it feels so nice. It had this slight, almost oiliness texture to it, to the wine itself. That worked so well with the bubbles. Like, I don't know, there was something texturally.
Oily. So on point. Oh, texturally. Oh, I thought it meant like a minerality. Okay, gotcha.
Oh, no, oily, like something like in the base wine itself. There was a slight oiliness or just weight to it that was so nice, that worked so fucking well with the bubbles. I enjoyed this wine so through and through. Now, I bought this wine through Deniz Cellars, Diniz. Deniz Cellars, I actually linked to them in a recent Substack that was for LA wildfire relief, because when I bought this wine, they were donating 22% of proceeds to wildfire relief. And this is a lady, Sandra Gomez Rocha, or Roca. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. She has Portuguese roots, Portuguese background. She lives here in LA. She was actually in my WSET 3 class, so I know her from that. And I placed an order with her during the wildfire relief thing and got this sparkling Alvarinho, because I'd never had a sparkling Alvarinho before. And boy, has this blown me away. So I got to sit in on a producer tasting when she went to one of the local wine shops, because I picked up my order there. And she was like, and I'm letting them sample all the wines. They let me taste them too. She has a 100% Alicante Boucher out of Portugal that she carries. And Alicante Boucher is one of the rare grape varieties out there that has a red pulp, so a red juice, not just red skins. So when you press the juice, it's already lightly red. You can't make a purely white wine out of this, no matter what. And that it's actually the Alicante Boucher is what the wine shop wound up picking up, because they were like, that's amazing. Oh, good. Yeah. And I have a bottle of that as well. I haven't opened it yet. So that might show up in a pairing in the future as well. But she's she's Portuguese wine importer. But she can sell direct to the public on her website at any number of bottles. So you can go to the website. We'll have a link down below and pick up a bottle. Definitely get the Super Reserva Sparkling Alvarinho, which is Alvarinho. But that's the Portuguese spelling of it and pronunciation of it with an H. And from the Vinho Verde, excellent Sparkling Alvarinho. And so old school method, new world-ish style. And producer. And so I thought, and then I wanted that sparkling. I wanted that effervescence with this comic, something light on its feet. So those are our pairings. Yeah, that's good. I like both those pairings. I'm gonna have to check out I do too. Yeah. Sure. Like I said, I got to try your oatmeal stout too. And then when you're back in LA someday, I'll hit her up for another bottle of that. Deal. We can just go pick it up from her. That's right. Place. She's here, and I can literally be like, can I just buy one bottle and I'll just swing by and grab it, and she'll probably say yes. So now it's easy for us. And if you're in the LA area, hey, definitely look her up. Otherwise, but yeah, she does ship. She will take, she has a warehouse and all that fun stuff, so she can take on online orders. So once again, guys, Immortal Sergeant by Joe Kelly and Ken Nimura from Image Comics. It's in trade paperback form. You can buy it digitally. I would even recommend looking at it that way. And then check out their previous work, I Kill Giants, either the film from 2017 or the graphic novel as well, which is out and prevalent. And this has been another episode of Wine and, soon not to be called Wine and, but for now still called Wine and. We will see you next week for another Wine and Entertainment pairing for your entertainment. Until then, take care, and we'll talk to you then, folks.
Later, people.
Ciao.